Financial aid present.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jael Perez, and I'm one of the Associate Directors for the Financial Aid Office. And today I have with me Teresa Villarreal, and she's going to be monitoring the chat in case you have any questions as we're going through this presentation. Next, please. So the financial aid process, it begins with submitting the FAFSA application. So it's either the FAFSA or TASFA, and we're going to get into the TASFA a little bit later. So the free application for federal student aid or FAFSA for the upcoming year, it will become available on October 1st, and it is available at www.fafsa.gov. The key as it pertains to the FAFSA is it is a federal application. So in order for a student to be eligible for federal financial aid, the student must be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. That's why then the TASFA is typically the option for students that do not meet this criteria. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion with students that are under DACA or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and they submit the FAFSA by accident. Because these students, DACA or Deferred Action, it does not provide permanent residency. These students are not eligible to submit a FAFSA, so they still have to submit a TASFA application. One key thing to keep in mind, however, is that these requirements as far as citizenship and being a permanent resident are only for the student, right? So it doesn't matter what the parent's citizenship status is. So it's only the student. There is, of course, the recommended priority deadline, which is January 15. We strongly encourage for all students to try to meet this deadline. Just like Zach mentioned before, we have been fortunate enough that we always receive, we have received the largest Texas grant allocation in the state. However, this year, the state did begin to make some cuts to the Texas grant program. So just because we received the largest, it doesn't necessarily mean that overall the Texas grant program, they are making some cuts, of course, probably because of the current situation, right? And so that is important, that this does not necessarily mean we will be able to cover all the students that are eligible. Just like any other university, you know, we're still limited to our allocation of Texas grant. So that's why it is very important, because for the Texas grant, there is a priority that should be given for students that complete the FAFSA or the TASFA by the January 15 deadline. So strongly encourage your students, especially if they might be Texas grant eligible, to submit the FAFSA by this date. Next, please. So the FAFSA does have a mobile app, and it is My Student Aid. And actually it's called My Student Aid because it's for more than just completing the FAFSA, right? It's for several federal processes. However, the FAFSA is one of these things that the students can actually complete. So the mobile app, a student can submit a FAFSA from beginning to end. The parent can also sign the FAFSA, you know, from on using the mobile app. It is fairly user-friendly in that it only shows the student questions that pertain to them. It has the same FAFSA logic, you know, as the website. Next, please. So what is needed to complete the financial aid application? So pretty much, basically, it's income information. So the income information for the 2019 year. So for mostly everybody, right, that information should be readily available, right? Because it's not the information for this current year, but from the previous year. So it's going to be, of course, income tax returns or W-2s, depending on the situation and whether the parent or not filed a tax return. The social security number, of course, for the student, very important. Social security number is one of those things that cannot be changed, not even by us, after it has been submitted. So it is very, very important for students, to make sure that they use their correct social security number. Because if they make a mistake, the only way to correct it is then to work directly with FAFSA central processing, as they're the only ones that can actually change that, that social security number. If the student's a permanent resident, they will need to have their permanent resident card on hand, because they will need to submit the alien registration number that is on the permanent resident card. And of course, other income information, such as if the family has untaxed income that is not found on the tax return, such as child support received or paid, veteran benefits, social security benefits, disability benefits. Another thing is, of course, the FAFSA. In order to sign it, both the student and a parent will need the FSA ID. The parent can only obtain an FSA ID if they have a social security number. So if the parent does not have a social security number, then remember that the FAFSA, they will indicate zeros on their FAFSA where the social security number goes, and they will need to sign using a signature page, which this signature page is mailed to FAFSA central processing. And of course, very important, however, is that it can be submitted, and it should be submitted, even if their signature page is going to be sent later on. And because, again, very important, the FAFSA submission date, it's important for that priority deadline. Next, please. So the IRS data retrieval, the IRS data retrieval is the process by which in the FAFSA, you can actually bring the information directly over from the IRS into the FAFSA. As long as if the student or parent has filed a tax return, the information can be brought over directly. This continues to be, of course, the fastest and most accurate way to provide the income information, and it can save a lot of trouble down the line, especially if the student is selected for verification, because that's one less item that they will need to submit for verification. So of course, we strongly encourage, in order to get the IRS data retrieval for the student or parent, what is needed is basically the FSA ID. And then also, of course, they'll need to know some basic information on how the tax return was submitted, such as the filing status, the address that was used. So of course, it's helpful to have the tax return in front, in order to do this process. But of course, we strongly encourage for students to use this. Thanks. So again, just going back, to the FAFSA or TASFA. So a student, the majority of our students, right, they are going to be U.S. citizens or permanent residents. And so they will submit a FAFSA application. However, for those students who are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents, but that could be classified as a Texas resident under the Senate Bill Law 1528, they should be submitting a TASFA application. Now, even though the residency determination is made by the admissions office, however, we do not, we accept the TASFA even if that residency determination has not been made yet, right? So if the student is still submitting documents, to the admissions office in order for that residency determination to be made, that's okay. Again, because of the priority deadline, we want the student to just go ahead and get the TASFA in, even if that determination has not been made yet. Next, please. So the TASFA, very much like the FAFSA, it will become available on October 1st, just right around the corner. However, this one will be available at our website. So at the financial aid website, www.utrgv.edu/finaid, under the form section for the 2021-2022 academic year. It is, of course, also the priority deadline is the same as for the FAFSA, right? So January 15. Very important, however, especially for TASFA students, it is even more important for them to submit the TASFA application as early as possible, because keep in mind that TASFA students only qualify for state and institutional aid. So this funding typically is more limited than federal funding. So that's why it is extremely, extremely important for TASFA students to submit their TASFA as early as possible. The TASFA, of course, it's a paper form. So in the website, they'll get the paper form, they'll fill it out, and it can be submitted via email to our email, which is the finaid@utrgv.edu. Next, please. So the information needed is fairly similar to the FAFSA. However, the main difference is that for the TASFA, the student actually submits a copy, or in this case, it will be a scan, right? If it's via email, it's a scan of the documents, right? Whereas in the FAFSA, they use the documents and they enter the information directly into the FAFSA. So then depending, if the parent or the student filed a tax return, they would provide a signed copy of the tax return. If they did not, but have W-2s, they would provide that. However, if they have neither of those documents, but they worked, then we have a form that is called the Income Information for Non-Tax Filers. And this form will also be found on our website right alongside the TASFA. It is one of the documents that we also release at the same time that we release the TASFA form. Also, if there's a situation where the parents may have filed a foreign tax return, then of course that will be what will be submitted along with the TASFA application. Now, sometimes we know that, for example, if they don't have these documents on hand right away, still we encourage the student to submit the TASFA application, right? And then work on getting these documents. Because again, much like the FAFSA, what we consider is these documents, we consider them kind of like if it was the student was selected for verification and they need to submit that. But the TASFA is the initial trigger that the student submits, just like they would submit the FAFSA application. Selective service registration, keep in mind that it is a requirement for all male students. So from ages 18 to 25. The main difference is that on the FAFSA, it is a lot easier because on the FAFSA, the student can just say, register me, and the FAFSA will register the student. However, the TASFA does not have that capability. So it does mean that the student is responsible for registering themselves with selective service. The student can register 30 days before their 18th birthday. So that's when they can begin submitting the documents. If they happen to have a social security number, they can register online at sss.gov website. But if they do not have a social security number, then the paper form does need to be mailed in. And of course, it does take some time for them to get their selective service registration card back. We will need a copy or a scan, right, of the selective service registration card. Once they sign it, they do have to sign it in order for it to be official. And however, the way we do this is that the student, in order to get awarded for financial aid, they're not required to have the proof of selective service. However, we do require for them to have proof of selective service registration before we will release their financial aid. So, so then we do know it sometimes does take a little while, right? So that's why it is important for the student to do it as soon as they're eligible to register for selective service. Next, please. So FAFSA demo site. So if you are new to perhaps using the FAFSA application, the FAFSA for the past few years, I mean, it hasn't had many major changes. It's pretty much looks the same, you know, it will pretty much look the same as it looked last year. You know, sometimes they do some slight cosmetic changes or some slight wording changes just for additional clarification. However, there is a demo site. However, it's not available just yet. Unfortunately, they don't make it available until September 30th, which is just one day before the real FAFSA comes out, right? However, the demo site is good because it allows you or me or anybody to see what the FAFSA looks like without needing needing a student, right? Because actually the FAFSA demo site provides test student information and parent information that you can use to kind of navigate through it. It provides FSA IDs, you know, social security numbers, fake social security numbers, obviously, right? And of course, this website, though, it is not a secure website. Just like I'm sharing here the password and the username and password with you, it is something that is widely shared, right? So that's why it has its own test information, because you shouldn't put real information into this website because it's not a secure website. Next, please. Special circumstances. So whether a student submits a FAFSA or a TASFA, the FAFSA and the TASFA applications are kind of a snapshot of the family situation at a certain point in time. And sometimes it does not accurately reflect the family situation. So for example, they use income information from 2019. Sometimes it is possible that the income may have changed, may be lower or maybe drastically have changed in 2020. And so then that's where professional judgments come in. Sometimes also other circumstances, you know, maybe the family may have unusually large medical bills or nursing home expenses that are not covered by insurance. Or sometimes also we may have a situation where the student is required to provide parental information as per the FAFSA or TASFA definition. However, they do not have contact with their parents. You know, they have lived maybe with their grandparents all their life or with another family member, and they were not formally adopted or they're not in legal guardianship. So for those types of situations is where, you know, our financial aid advisors, they, with documentation, they do have the authority to make changes to the original FAFSA information that was submitted. So whether it be overriding the need for parental information, or whether it be making changes to the income information that was provided on the FAFSA. So in these situations, we still want to encourage that you still should encourage the student to submit their FAFSA or TASFA with the information as it is. So for example, if they had an income change, they still will submit the FAFSA or TASFA with the 2019 income information. If they cannot provide parental information, they still will submit the FAFSA or TASFA without the parental information, right? And that's of course to get the application in, and then the student should be directed to schedule an appointment with one of our financial aid advisors. And that can be done by calling our Youth Central team at 888-882-4026. Next, please. And next, please. So verification. So verification is the process by which the FAFSA some students get selected for verification on the FAFSA. And the reason for this is because the FAFSA is basically self-prepared, right? So this is kind of the federal government's quality assurance program, right? To kind of check if students are submitting the correct information on the FAFSA, right? So some students get selected, others do not. And so the way we're handling our verification is starting this past year, actually, we started using this process, this software, which is called ProVerifier Plus. In this particular software, thankfully, we had started using it because it is basically a way for students to complete their full verification process online, right? So they can submit, they can upload the forms from their smartphone, tablet, or a computer. And so everything can be completed kind of fully online. You know, they don't have to submit actual paper documents. The process typically begins is the student will receive, once they're admitted and selected for verification, then they'll receive an email directing them to log into the ProVerifier website, which is the website that you see on the slide. Also on their student portal, if the student logs in, you know, they will see and they will be directed to this website as well. So this is why it is very important for students to activate their email address as soon as possible. And that's because if they get selected for verification, all of the communication and pretty much any other communication from the financial aid office will be directly to their UTRGV email address. In the process itself, you know, like I said, it's fully online. The same thing for the parent. So the parent also, everything that the parent has to be filled out or signed, it will also be fully online. Next one, please. So typically the process begins with a verification worksheet, much like traditional verification. So the student will enter some basic information about the family and so on. And from then on, it will determine what else is needed for that student. Now, very important, because there is some information that has to be signed or completed by the parent, the student will be asked to provide a parent email. So it is important, you know, that the student provide a correct email, right? Because otherwise, you know, it will be going somewhere else. There are actually two places where it asks for a parent email. Once it's in the verification worksheet. Another one is in a form called a power form, which is for the DocuSign, so that the parent can sign online. Now, it is not necessary for the parent to have an email. If they do not have an email, unlike the FSA ID, the student can provide their email for the parent. It's just important that the student knows, right, that means they're going to be getting emails for themselves and for their parent, right? And so they need to differentiate appropriately, right? The good thing about this process is that, like I mentioned, everything can be completed online, including the tax return information. So in the case that the parent or student filed taxes and they didn't do the IRS data retrieval, this process, instead of asking them to upload a tax return or to go and ask the IRS for a tax transcript, what it asks them to fill out is a form which is called the 4506T form. And then when they fill out that form, it gives us the authority to then go and get their income tax information directly from the IRS on their behalf. So typically this kind of shortens the process, right? Because instead of the student or parent trying to go and get these forms from the IRS or trying to go and find these forms, you know, they just sign this form giving the authority for the IRS to provide this information directly. This also shortens the verification process because when the information comes from the IRS, it can be it's automated. The review process is automated. Of course, if for whatever reason, something happens and the parent or student um, cannot get this information directly from the IRS, then they do have, at that point, they will be given the ability, to upload the actual paper forms. If the student or parent has any questions, there is a specific number that they can contact, and this will be directly with our Pro Verifier team. And in that phone number is 956-338-0220. Next, please. So a vast majority of the students will be going through verification on the Pro Verifier system. Probably, I'm thinking like maybe 95% of the students. And there's a small group of students that, because of their specific situation, they are not able to be handled in the Pro Verifier system. Some of these examples are students that were selected for citizenship verification, selective service verification, or there may be dependency issues, on the dependency questions. So, so then in this case, these students, it will be kind of the traditional method of verification, in that in their self-service account, they will actually see the individual documents. So they will see individual documents that they have to submit. Now, these documents can still be submitted online, but in this case, it will be through our Document Central portal, which you see the website on the slide. And these documents, of course, just like with Pro Verify, of course, as it pertains everything having to do with verification, we recommend that students, of course, submit everything as soon as possible. Next, please. And the Tuition Advantage program. So Tuition Advantage is one of our newest programs. And so this one became available actually this current year, actually, and it's going to be continuing over for the next year. So this particular program, it is a program that covers any gap in tuition and fee expenses, mandatory fees specifically, for the regular academic year. When the student does not have enough gift aid, and by gift aid, that means grants or scholarships, right? So free money, it does not include student loans, from either federal, state, private, or institutional aid. The requirements for this program, the family has to have an income of $95,000 or less and demonstrate financial need. The $95,000, it is family, so it does mean the parents plus the student's income combined, right? Because it is for the whole family. Now, in demonstrate financial need, it is a financial aid program. So the student does have to have financial need, which financial need, just really quick, is typically the cost of attendance minus the estimated family contribution, which comes from the FAFSA or TASFA. So, so then they have to have that need as well in order to receive funds from this program. They have to be classified as a Texas resident and be enrolled for 15 hours or more per semester. This is only available for students seeking a first bachelor's degree. So if the student already has a bachelor's, or students that are doing graduate programs, this program is not available to them. The requirements, the current academic requirements, are that an entering freshman must have an ACT of a 19 or an SAT of a 990, or be in the top 10% of the graduating class. Now, currently, we are in the process of coming up with guidelines specifically for this upcoming fall, since UTRGV will be test optional. So then that means the ACT or SAT scores may not be available to make this determination. So it will be replaced by something else. It's just we don't have the information just yet specifically. You know, probably it will be some kind of ranking, you know, or something like that, you know, that they will have to meet instead of these requirements. And of course, the exception is only for this upcoming fall that that will be test optional. The other thing is the students do have to complete the FAFSA or TASFA process. And here the key is process and be admitted by March 1st. So the FAFSA and TASFA process means everything, right? So all of the documents that are requested after the fact, right, they do have to be submitted. And so, so then that's very important to keep in mind, because that's kind of, realistically speaking, a student could not possibly submit a FAFSA or a TASFA or be admitted on March 1st and still meet the requirements for this program. They have to start those processes actually earlier. And the reason for that is because, for example, a student has to be admitted to be selected for verification. So if a student is admitted barely on March 1st, and then they're selected for verification, they already did not meet these deadline requirements. For more information, the website for this program is utrgv.edu/tuition-advantage. And finally, this is just some websites, you know, that might be helpful. So the financial aid website again, the scholarships website, and we have the Ask Real website, which this one is kind of like a frequently asked question, as well as the websites relating to the federal government programs, the state programs, and then also some regional information. And this is the contact information for our office. If any of your students, you know, if they have any questions, this is our contact information. And at this point, I think we have only a little bit of time. So if there are any questions, if you would like to ask any questions, whether it be on the chat or by unmuting yourself, feel free to do so.